everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us. Super excited to be here for episode 3 of the Crypto Use Case podcast. We are with a very special guest, Maurice, CEO and co-founder of Yellowcard. Chris has started one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cryptocurrencies exchange in the African continent. They serve customers all over the region and more. And we are excited to dive into it with Chris about all things crypto, stable coins, real-world adoptions in the African continent. It's, of course, one of those case studies whenever you're talking about crypto stable coins adoption in Africa. So we have the perfect guest to dive deep into this topic. Thanks for joining us, Chris. How are you?
My brothers, it's good to be here, man. Y'all are the special ones. I'm just trying to be big boys like y'all.
Awesome. Well, let's start with the easy questions. Chris, tell us a little bit about your story. Where did you grow up? What's your personal background? Very interested to learn a little bit more about yourself.
Yes. So I grew up in New Orleans, in the U.S. Went to college at Auburn in Alabama. So I am about as Southern as it gets. And I think the question that I always get is sort of how did I end up in Nigeria? How did I end up on the continent? And the truth of the matter is, I met a Nigerian guy on the internet that told me to. And as most good stories start and as most happy endings begin, I did exactly what this Nigerian guy that I met on the internet told me. And so, we were building something similar in the US. We were going to put a gift card in CVS, Walmart, places like that. You'd be able to walk in, buy this gift card, redeem it for crypto. And, we were building this out, and I ended up meeting a Nigerian man at a Wells Fargo who was sending $200 to his family. And the bank charged him $90 to send $200 over to his family. And I thought, that seems crazy, right? And so, I talked to this guy. Hey, have you heard of Bitcoin? It's free, it's instant, it's fun, all this great stuff. And went home and started thinking, what's this guy's mom going to do with $200 of Bitcoin? Right? Like everybody in the industry loves to, opine about everything that, this technology is going to do, and it's going to, make payments better and save the world and, wash your car and everything else. And, just wanted to understand, like, what would this guy's mom actually do with this? Right? You can't buy food with that. You can't pay rent with that. And so I don't think I knew where Nigeria was on a map at the time. They don't teach you nearly as much about Africa as you might think in the Louisiana education system. Comes as a surprise to some people. But I wanted to learn everything that I could, right? And so I started just doing all this research, trying to understand, the country and the continent and the currency.
What year was this?
This was 2017. That I was at the bank, and then sort of going into 2018, right? And so, meet this guy, and wanted to learn everything that I could, right? I just started doing all this research, trying to understand, the continent and Nigeria. And I realized if I want to understand Nigeria, I need to speak to somebody from there. And so I put out an ad online that said, looking to speak to Nigerian men, which, in hindsight, probably could have been worded better. But I got exactly what I needed, right? And I, got in touch with this guy. And this is about the point in my life that I learned that Nigerians are the most convincing people on the face of this planet, because within about a month and a half of meeting this Nigerian man on the internet, he'd convinced me to go get a passport and take the first international flight of my life. I'd been on a plane 4 times in my life before starting the company, and I landed in Lagos, Nigeria on a 6-day-old passport, no visa, no shots, and a one-way ticket that I spent all of my money on. And so I think that pretty much describes me.
That's awesome. I don't know if there is a better way to start a story than what you just told us, but super excited, of course, to dive deep into the Nigeria experience and studying the continent and so forth. I guess before crypto, before Yellowcard, Chris, did you work in traditional finance? Did you have any other role, or was this really your first idea, your first out of college type of experience that you were looking to pursue?
Yeah, it depends how you define traditional finance. I sold Pokémon cards on the internet. And so, if you take
It's
a
called
really broad
trading,
TradFi definition,
commodities trading.
that's exactly how I was trading commodities. So, no, look, I sold Pokemon cards on the internet essentially from around fifth grade until, really yellow card took off. That's how I, made money back in the day. So
That's awesome. And your crypto story, how did you go down the rabbit hole? How did you learn about Bitcoin? Did you know about stable coins when you were having the conversation with this man already? What is that journey looking like?
yeah, so I mean, I got into Bitcoin pretty early, right? So back in 2013, my now co-founder is the guy who would go around parties back in the day, just evangelizing Bitcoin. Right, that's all he wanted to talk about. He's a big guy too, so he'd have like six people in a corner just preaching the gospel, and got me in about 2013. By 2015, I was fully down the rabbit hole. Right, this is the best thing ever. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. All of that, and so I have seen just about every up and down imaginable. Obviously, at the time of recording this, we're now at an all-time high, so spirits are
Let's
high,
go.
right? But yeah, I mean, I've seen pretty much every up and down imaginable. I remember when Tether first came out, and yeah, I mean, it's look, I mean, I think when what I would say is when Tether came out. I was aware of stablecoins. However, they were not nearly what they are today. Right. And I think the concept of stablecoins for payments hadn't really hit yet. And it certainly wasn't as sexy as it is now.
Yeah. It was a trading facility, like not that many. Like it was people moving money between exchanges, traders mostly. No payments. I think 2020 or 2019 was when at least when I started seeing payment stable coins as kind of like more dollars on chain used for payments rather than a trading facility.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you said you took your trip to Lagos, met this. I want Nigeria to talk to Nigerian men. Tell us what you found there. You had this idea of the $200 transfer, $90. What is the mom gonna do with that Bitcoin? Tell us a little bit about what you found there when you got there.
Yeah, I think the big lesson that we learned, right, is we went over there thinking that we were solving that problem, right? Thinking that like this is the big issue, right? This person spent $90 to send 200, and what I would say is upon getting there, we realized that there are 1,000,001 remittance apps, right? Like if you need to send money from point A to point B, you can download 5 apps in the time that it'll take me to finish this sentence, go through a very minimal onboarding process, link a card, link a bank account, and you can send money to basically anywhere in the world. And so, remittance isn't necessarily the issue anymore, right? There's TransferWise, there's WorldRemit, there's MoneyGram, there's Western Union, there's RIA, there's, you can go on and on about all the different remittance companies, right? There's 70 companies that do this stuff. The core problem when it comes to the cost is right now, when you look, broadly across the continent, there's no way to actually access or interact with Web3, right? With stable coins, with this technology. And I think, I don't have to preach to the choir here, right? Stable coins are the best way of moving money from point A to point B on earth, bar none, right? It's the fastest, the most affordable, all of that. And so, the problem is that, when you're moving money through traditional rails, there are high costs associated with that, especially when when one of those banks is on the African continent, because then there's, 4 intermediaries in between, and, the money has to, be converted and all of this, right? And it just leads to all these problems. And so, I think the big thing that we realized is that we don't need to create another remittance app. Right. What we need to be able to give people the ability to actually interact with this technology in a way that enables them to benefit from it. And so, that's what we set out to build, was not, not how do we get like this guy in Alabama using us to send that $200 over, right? It was, how do we build just an infrastructure around stablecoins that can interact with the local banking system, that can interact with local payment methods, so that all of these companies that are sending $200 to this guy can use this infrastructure and be able to do that in a much more affordable and sort of justifiable fee structure.
And Chris, maybe for the uninitiated, for those that haven't had the chance to take the trip to Lagos or elsewhere in Africa, can you give us a primer on the financial infrastructure, the financial system in Africa, how it works, how do people transact with each other? What is the currency situation? It's a massive region with many countries, many different currencies. Can you just explain us a little bit what someone going there nowadays is dealing with, so that then we can talk about how you guys are transforming the environment, the ecosystem through crypto to stablecoins?
Yeah, so I would say that Africa as a whole is arguably the most diverse continent on the planet. And I think that there is a tendency for most people, especially in the West, to sort of see it as like a monolith, right? It's Africa as a country, right? It's all sort of one thing. Nigeria and Botswana have about as much in common as Italy and China, right? And so it's just different people, different cultures. Everything is different as you travel around the continent, right? There are similarities in certain regions, but especially as you start moving around areas of the broader continent, it gets very different, right? You cross a border, the language is different, the currency is different, the banking system is different, the people are different, everything is different. I think again, just like speaking general in terms of general trends across the continent. And this I find to be broadly true pretty much everywhere in the world outside of the United States, is local payments are pretty much solved for, right? And I like to tell people it'll be a cold day in hell before you're walking into a coffee shop in Nairobi and you're paying for your latte with Bitcoin or stable coins or anything like that, right? It's just not happening anytime soon, right? This stuff is not replacing local currencies. At least in any of the countries that we deal in. Local payments are largely solved, right? The Nigerian banking system essentially works like Cash App in the US. Everything's instant. I can send you money for, basically free at any time, 24 hours. It'll hit your account, all of that. No banking hours, none of that. You go out to other countries where maybe the banking system isn't as strong, but they have a very strong mobile money presence. Right. In Kenya, you have M-Pesa. 90% of adults are using M-Pesa. I can text money to anybody in the country at any time. It's all instant. Right. And so
to maybe for like the Western audience used to kind of like the US ACH wire situation, the experience and when I hear you, Argentina is very similar. Brazil, famously with Pix, is very similar. So it's the equivalent of having almost like I would say a free L2 essentially, but like gasless. So you're not paying anything to move money, even between banks, with finality in like 1 second. And you're sending money usually to like an ENS equivalent, right? At least like you have an alias or you have a phone number or an email or something like that you're sending. So what you're describing is most of the countries that you operate have a payment system that essentially looks like that, right? So if you're paying in local currency, you move money instantly for free, at least in retail for kind of immediately, like no issues to be solved.
100%, 100%, right? I think that's and again, this has been my experience. Look, in Brazil, certainly, right? Brazil's a great example. India, etc. Local payments are largely solved for. I think that where the broader financial system starts to have issues is as soon as you need to cross a border, right? Any international payment, that's where things become more difficult, right? And so if you look broadly across the continent, you have 70% of countries in Africa, right? There's 55 countries on the continent. 70% of them have declared an FX shortage that's now a crisis, right? Which means, there's just not enough dollars to go around. And, when you look again broadly across the continent, you're talking about countries that are very import dependent. There's not a ton of industry in most countries in Africa. And what that means is they need to import a lot, right? They're importing from neighbors, they're importing from Europe, they're importing from China, they're importing from India, from the US, from everywhere, right? Everything from medicine to clothing to other essentials. And all of that requires dollars, right? That all requires dollars to be able to make those international payments, to be able to facilitate imports, to be able to facilitate commerce and everything continuing. And when you have an issue where across many countries there's shortages, it becomes very difficult for these businesses. And so businesses have a very hard time accessing the hard currency that they need, being able to keep their business flowing, being able to double down, to invest more, to hire more, to grow the economy on the continent, right? And in each in particular country. And I think that's really where I think stablecoins come into play, right? Is it just from a broad macro level, this technology is enabling businesses on the continent to be able to invest more, to be able to operate more freely, to be able to double down on hiring, on economic growth in these countries in a way that just was not happening before this technology. And I think all the the economic data points towards that over the past several years you've just seen tremendous growth from so many different parts of the region.
Let me ask you, so when you say there's not enough dollars, right? In theory, in a free market, supply and demand balance each other, right? So if you want to buy $1, there's always a price in which that dollar would settle. Is that because countries are restricting the sale of dollar and they're setting a price? Like, what is it that creates this kind of imbalance in the kind of the foreign exchange market?
Yeah, there's a number of factors, right? I think with the broader banking system across the continent, you have sort of all the dollars go in and then they get assigned to priorities, right? And those priorities might not always align with what people need to facilitate certain imports, right? Those priorities might not align with being able to get a pharmaceutical company the money that it needs to import dollars, or getting a food company the ability to import raw materials or food to be able to feed the country. And that doesn't make it sort of right or wrong, but the bottom line is there's just not enough to go around, right? And so in that you run into problems, right?
And do you have what is the price of like a USDT on local currency versus like the official rate? Are those at the same price, or is there a premium that gets paid on the USDT market, kind of like reflecting that kind of like misbalance? Like how does that dynamic play out?
It really depends on the country, right? It depends on the country. It depends on sort of the situation on the ground. What I would say is that the beauty of stablecoins are a free market. And as with any free market, people figure out the value very quickly, right? And so, you have some countries where it aligns well. You have some countries where it doesn't. But people figure out the value, right? Look, people are smart, people are resourceful. And so, you give people a technology that sort of creates a free market, and people will figure out very quickly how to price that, right? And I think that in general, this stable coins, right? Like this commodity as a whole is one of the most free markets on earth, right? There's no sort of interference, right, overall with like stablecoin markets. And so I think, when you look broadly across the continent, again, it varies country by country, but you always get a good sense of sort of where things are.
Yeah, and in the end, that's enabled by that unified, decentralized ledger, right? That's the technology that Yellow Card is built around, that many crypto companies are building around, and that unified ledger is ultimately what is solving that cross-border lack problems or lack of access to dollars and so forth. So super interesting. And talking about Yellow Card, Chris, how did we get there? Okay, trip to Lagos, seeing all of these inefficiencies, getting all of these ideas. What's the story of the founding team? How did you guys get together? How did this company start? And tell us, of course, about Yellow Card.
Man, yeah, I mean, so that's, I mean, that, I mean, the trip to Nigeria is really what cemented it, right? And so, I mean, the broader founding team, we have our CTO, who's the guy that taught me about Bitcoin in the first place, Justin. We have John, who at the time was an intern and came to Nigeria with me on about 3 days' notice, telling his mom on Mother's Day that he's going to be going to Nigeria.
She must have been happy.
Yeah, she was thrilled. That's what every mom wants to hear, is that
exactly.
you're going to Nigeria on essentially no notice with no money, and so and then on the Africa side, right, we have Minachi, who's the guy that I met on the internet, and then his friend from college, Fino, and yeah, that's sort of the crew that went there and just made it happen, right? So just got to work and slowly but surely made it grow, right? I think as look, when we started out, it was, about, okay, great. How do we get this technology ready? How do we, build a platform, sort of focus on the initial product, things like that. And, once we put the V1 out there, right, which the V1 was just just simple on and off ramp, right? It was, and at the time there were no stable coins, right? It was all Bitcoin. To your point, Martin, stable coins didn't really become a thing until like 2020, 2021. So, I mean, when we started out, it was just Bitcoin. It was, like you could buy Bitcoin with Naira, you could sell Bitcoin for Naira, and that was it, right? We were just going back and forth. I mean, it took us over a month to do our first $100,000 in transactions, right? Which, I mean, look, $100,000 might sound like a lot of money, but as y'all in the crypto industry know, that is, that is peanuts, right? Especially with the slim margins. But it took us over a month to do our first $100,000, and that was in July of 2019. By the end of the year, we were doing about $1 million a month, right? And so, it's like, okay, great. We're growing. We're starting to make some progress. COVID is what really set it off. So, the lockdown hits, right? Everybody's stuck inside. Everybody goes online. We went from doing $1 million a month to $1 million a day, pretty much overnight. And that was when we realized, like, oh shit, we have to be a real company now, right? Like we're not playing startup anymore, boys. Like this is, we gotta make this happen. And so, yeah, I mean, we just, we buckled down, right? I mean, look, I tell everybody, I think, with, any amount of success, right? Not to say that, we're, uber successful or anything, but, with any amount of success, there's always sort of the idea, but then there's also timing, right? And COVID, I mean, just timing was perfect. There was literally nothing else to do but work. It was great. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Obviously the pandemic was bad, but, for me, it worked out pretty well. Right. So, and yeah, I mean, Yellow Card more broadly, right? I think, to the second part of your question. So now fast forwarding quite a bit, right? We are the largest licensed stablecoin and payments infrastructure for Africa and the broader emerging world. And so, we operate in 20 countries across right now sub-Saharan Africa with, plans to expand into other emerging markets, right, and other other parts of the world that I think are just completely underserved, right? I look at like the Middle East outside of GCC and places like that. And yeah, that's essentially what we do, right? We work with businesses right now across the continent on making it easy for them to make international payments, manage their treasury, and really access the dollar and do anything that you would be able to do with the dollar using stablecoins, right? Using this alternative asset.
Yeah. So you just to see if I understood correctly, you started in 2019. It was a kind of like buy and sell Bitcoin on and off ramp in local currency in Nigeria. You expanded then to 20 countries. You implemented stable coins probably 2020, 2021. That took off. I want to hear a little bit more about that. But now you're fully focused on the B2B side, on the international payments of B2B sides on 20 countries. You have on and off ramps in all 20 countries. Is that safe
Exactly.
to say? Wow, congrats. That must be a lot of work. And businesses are using you in order to pay internationally among each other, among other people that hold stable coins, and essentially kind of receive stable coins and do commerce. Want to double click on this transition, right? From Bitcoin to stable coins, from retail to business. What were the moments where you discovered these use cases and you were like, we need to double down on this? And how did that happen?
Yeah, so the stablecoin one hit us like a ton of bricks, right? I mean, so we were doing just Bitcoin, and I think at one point we had added Ethereum. If we have done more than 10 transactions all time on Ethereum, I would be shocked to learn that from internal metrics. Nobody wanted it, right? The fees are too high. Nobody's interested. Yeah. And then, we started to realize like, okay, wow, like Tether is really taking off, right? This is, Tether is, just skyrocketing right now. And specifically it's USDT on Tron, right? It's not on Ethereum, right? Nobody's using it on Ethereum because it
Too
costs
expensive.
$50. Yeah, it's $50 to make a $5 transaction, right? So who in their right mind is doing that, right? And so we added USDT on Tron. I guess that would have been the end of 2020. So looking into 2021. And pretty immediately, our volume sort of balanced out, and it was about 30% USDT, and then about 70% Bitcoin. And over the course of the next few months, it went from 0% Tether and 100% Bitcoin immediately to about 30-70. And over the course of the next few months, it very quickly became 99-1. Right.
Wow.
I mean, just, I like the transition was pretty remarkable. And I think, now, we have this heavy focus on stable coins and our branding and the stuff that we talk about. We still support Bitcoin. It's just that in practice, 99.9% of the stuff that we're doing is local fiat to stablecoin to local fiat, right? And it all just comes down to what people want. And I think when you look at it, it makes sense, right? These are practical transactions, right? These are people that need to make a payment, right? This is somebody that's looking to save money, things like that. And, look, would you rather, if you need to make a payment, right? You need to settle an invoice, let's say you need to make $1,000 payment. Would you rather figure out the math to send somebody 0.003468 BTC or $1,000, right? And so, it makes sense, right? And this is what we just kept hearing from people is it's like, look, I know exactly what I'm doing with the coins. The math is so much easier when I use USDT. Right. With Bitcoin, it's like, well, which exchange rate index are you using? And how do you, and what if the price goes down there's just all these sort of questions around it that I think sort of hurt Bitcoin when it comes to like the payments, right? The payments piece, right?
Yeah.
That stablecoins just don't have that problem. Everybody knows the dollar. Everybody around the world knows the exchange rate to the dollar from their currency. Right. It is the global reserve currency. And so there's a reason that everybody sort of everywhere has, just started adopting stablecoins in such a way, right? It's just a better way of using a currency that they're already familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Chris, how did Tether on Tron happen in Africa, right? I mean, it is the default payment method for most countries that rely on stablecoin, whether you're looking at LATAM, whether you're looking at Africa and other regions. Tether is known to have men on the grounds in a variety of regions, building relationship with local communities and so forth. Do you think that played a role in terms of adoption of the asset for this type of transactions, savings, and so forth? And after that, why Tron? How did that relationship happen? Why Tether on Tron versus Tether on, another layer 2? Was it just them being early, or was it a variety of other factors? Would be very curious to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can tell you, until recently, Tether did not have boots on the ground in pretty much any of these places. I mean, Tether, look, we could talk about just Tether for an hour, right? What they've done with, I think their core team at this point is like 40 people, right? I mean, this is like the most profitable company in the history of capitalism, and they have like 40 employees, right? I mean, it's wild what they've been able to accomplish. But no, it wasn't boots on the ground. It wasn't really through marketing. It wasn't any of that, right? They did it in the simplest way possible. And I mean, this is, you can ask anybody on the continent, they will agree with this. And I think look, I don't spend as much time in Latin America, but I believe that it's the same there. The reason that USDT on Tron won is as people were starting to come around to stablecoins, right? As people were starting to realize, wow, Bitcoin and blockchain technology and all of this is actually very useful for payments. And as people were coming around to stablecoins, USDC only had liquidity on Ethereum. USDT had this burgeoning sort of, presence on the Tron chain, right? And it's simple. Do you want to pay $50 to make that $5 transaction, or do you want to pay, a fraction of a penny? And that's it. And then it just took off from there, right? People didn't want to pay the fees, right? I mean, look, I don't use Ethereum a ton, but my understanding is the fees are still, several dollars to make transactions, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just, I think it's just so much more simple than people think it is, right? It wasn't like some crazy marketing strategy. It wasn't anything like that. It was just raw product market fit. We want to make cheap transactions. This allows us to make cheap transactions. Great.
That's great.
Tell us more how you moved from retail to business. How did that happen? Were businesses knocking on your door? Hey, I want to move this money. Were businesses opening accounts as retail users, and then you were like, hey, payments look big. Tell us how did it happen? Any funny stories?
And do you still serve retail customers as well, Chris? Would be curious to know that too.
So, I mean, look, the app is available for anybody, right? The platform, anybody can use it. I think that what I would say is that, in practice, not really, right? And it's exactly what you said. It is, we find businesses are signing up as retail users, right? I mean, and the thing is we started diving in, right? When we started out, we wanted to be essentially Coinbase for Africa. Right. And I think as we developed, we realized that, okay, this isn't really necessarily Coinbase. It's like PayPal. It's more of like a payments infrastructure than it is necessarily just people swapping, back and forth into, Bitcoin and Dogcoin and Catcoin and all the others. Right. And yeah, I think, back in especially 2021, 2022, I think is when we really started to do this, especially with FTX and sort of everything that was going on and Luna and all that. I will say, with all of the nonsense that's happened in crypto, the only thing that ever sort of that we ever saw sort of a dip in volumes from was Terra Luna. It was not FTX. We actually saw a pretty nice spike after FTX. Terra Luna, though, because people all of a sudden it's like, well, how stable are these stable coins, right? But we just started sort of looking at our unit economics and all of that more closely, and we started talking to our largest customers. And it's like, well, how do we get more people like you was the idea, right? The idea was not, we're going to, find out some, crazy thing about how this is actually like a dude that's, importing shoes and selling them, right? What we thought is like, well, great, let's talk to this guy. Let's figure out where he hangs out and then let's go advertise there so we can get more people like him, right? So, but, we started talking to these guys, and it's we realized very quickly, these are not retail users. These are businesses. These are people that are facilitating imports, right? That are, doing a service and receiving payment from overseas, that are, just any different number of, sort of business use cases that you can imagine. And so, we realized, the retail market exists on the continent, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that the retail market doesn't exist, but it's a lot smaller, right? And it's not as sort of developed. People don't have as much, expendable income as you do in the US, in Europe, in other parts of the world. And so, what we realized is like, wow, like businesses are the ones that are really spending. Businesses are the ones that are pushing actual volume, right? There's no, how the hell does like some dude get, $40,000 a week, right? And, it's like, it's setting off all these flags. So we need to talk to them because our system is flagging them. And it's like, well, I'm not, this isn't my money. It's, I, import, I sell, and then I, just keep the cycle going, right? It's a business use case. It's my business's money. And yeah, I think, for us, that was when the light bulb really went off, which is, we can, keep, pushing on this retail use case. And I think, the retail use case is still great. And I still, encourage people to go after it. But I think, for us, it's, how do we help serve these businesses? How do we make sure that these guys can, actually keep their business afloat, can manage their trade, can hire more, can invest more locally, can, do all of this and really just push the economy forward.
That's amazing. What did you learn from talking to these people? And what did the transition to business look like? Was it product-wise? Was it marketing-wise? Kind of go to market? What did you change? And like, of course, the compliance side for sure, but like, what changed on Yellow Card targeting businesses as opposed to retail and kind of making that the focus?
Yeah, I think, that was frankly the most beautiful thing about what we had spent all of this time building, is that there wasn't really much of a shift that needed to happen, right? The thing is like businesses and individuals need the same rails, right? They need bank account, they need mobile money, they need, all these different payment methods. And so there wasn't a ton of shift, right? We're either, it's just essentially like, okay, cool. How do we prime this for larger payments? Right. And, we were able to, work with our banks and make that happen. But I think that the big thing that came out of it, right. And the big thing that we realized is that there is definitely more of a need for an API, right? I think, before it's like, okay, yeah, exchanges have APIs because people like to plug in and do like crazy bot trading and all this stuff. And we just don't see a ton of that in the market. So we never really saw the purpose of investing in like a really good public facing API. And once we realized, this is businesses, I think we realized, wow, we do need this, right? We do need businesses to be able to tie in to our rails, right? And be able to automate some of this stuff, right? Be able to have it, flowing in through, their accounting software, being able to, push it through their platform, being able to offer it to their customers, right? Especially for a lot of the fintechs and other companies that we work with. And so that led to us, putting out our payments API, which I like to call Africa as a service, but that abbreviates to ASS. And so the team doesn't let me call it that. But that was, I would say the big, not shift, but sort of new product that that we
Mm-hmm.
put out, right? And now we have Coinbase that uses that. We have Block that uses that. We have a number of other big public companies across the U.S., across Europe that are utilizing the API, right, and that are able to better interact with their clients across the continent. We're helping small startups expand into Africa, right, that want to tap into new markets, be able to actually do that without having to worry about going around setting any of this stuff up themselves. And so, yeah, that's been, I think that's been pretty powerful, right? And again, it's all powered by stable coins, right? You throw stable coins in, it spits it out into any of these local banking systems, spits it out, anywhere, or vice versa. And so it's, it's, just very powerful for anybody that wants to operate on what is the fastest growing continent on Earth.
Yeah, maybe if being November 6th, it could be like Bridge for Africa, right? If you will.
Yes, yeah, it is funny because
you want to associate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so look, we work with Bridge, right? We power a lot of the stuff that they do in Africa, right? The transactions and everything that they do in Africa. And now that they are the most famous company in the space, it makes it so much easier to compare, right? But I mean, essentially, what Bridge does in the U.S. is what we do across the emerging world, right? So rather than like USDT to USD and sort of interoperability on chains and all of that, we do all the same stuff, but it's connected to a Nigerian bank account, right? It's connected to a bank account in South Africa and Botswana and any of these other places.
Yeah.
How difficult,
So,
Chris,
yes.
sorry, Martin, how difficult is it to manage this operation that touches so many different countries, so many different currencies? I assume you have inflation, you have volatility associated with the currencies themselves, you might have spreads for the FX transactions, etc., etc. How complex is this operation? Do you have multiple teams on the grounds in the various jurisdictions that you're operating with? And then maybe if you don't mind briefly touching about also the compliance aspects associated with running such a large-scale operation that touches so many different jurisdictions.
Yeah, it's actually very simple. We only have 10 people on the team.
Wow.
No, I'm joking. We have over 200 people. It's a very complex operation. Look, like I said earlier, right? These are very diverse countries, right? You cross a border and everything changes, right? And so it's a complex operation. But I think it's something that we've gotten I like to say down to a science, right? In terms of how we operate, right? We have almost a playbook, right, for how to handle a number of different situations. Because I mean, look, there's never a dull moment when you're operating in the countries that we operate in, right? So look, we have great teams on the ground. We have a great team overall. 96% of the entire staff is on the continent, right? And working in various local jurisdictions. We have people in 21 countries. We're fully remote, right? I mean, like I said, we're a proper COVID company, right? We really took off during COVID, and so there was never a need for an office. We have offices across various parts of the continent, but there was never really a need for a central office or anything like that. Everybody was working remote the whole time during COVID anyway, and then we just kept it that way. But yeah, we have great people on the ground across the board in each country that help really run things locally, right? And I think that that is critical if you want to expand across multiple different jurisdictions, right? Because the reality is that like I can only focus on one place at one time, right? That's as much as I want to tell myself that I'm multitasking and handling everything, it's not possible. And so you need to have really good people on the ground in all these different parts of the world to actually handle that, right? And so I think that's something that we've been able to get really good at, which is just finding talent across the continent, right? It's, I mean, this is again, it's a young place, right? We haven't talked about like the broader macro trends, but I mean, Africa, you have 1.3 billion people on the continent. The median age is 19 years old,
Wow.
right? The average woman on the African continent still has over 5 children.
Wow.
Right. And so, I mean, look, Lagos is going to be the largest city in the world at the turn of the century, right? Nigeria is supposed to have a larger population than China at the turn of the century, right? Because China is declining from a population standpoint and Nigeria is increasing rapidly. And so when you look at that, right, it's a young continent. You have a lot of like really talented young people. And what I love
Hungry.
about, yeah.
Like
Hungry.
ready to go. Yeah.
Like what I love about our generation in general is that no matter what parts of the world we all grew up in, we grew up at least somewhat similarly, right? So like, look, I think like, y'all grew up in different parts of the world, and like I grew up in the US. I think, y'all grew up in like, Latin America and Europe and various parts of the world, right? So, we all have a different experience growing up, but because of the internet, we all also kind of had a similar experience, right? Like we all, watched the same YouTube videos growing up, and we all like, now we're all like on X and looking at the same memes, and, and so, the world is getting like, like things are just, things are sort of becoming a lot more similar around the world, right? Thanks to the internet versus, you go back 90 years and nobody knew anything about anybody else and everybody was so totally different and all this. And so, look, I mean, you have just a lot of young people, very talented. I mean, some of the best coders that we have at the company learned on YouTube. Right. They learned on like, Code Academy. They learned online. Right. They didn't need to, go get a degree in computer science to be very good at this. Right. And so it's.
And now with ChatGPT, that is going to only grow exponentially.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the amount of talent, of self-learning that is going to come from all over the world is going to be incredible. So it's amazing to hear that.
Yeah.
Wanted to talk a little bit about kind of like your core mode, which is you're in 20 countries, you have banking as a service or kind of like banking integrations across 20 countries. Of course, there's other things that like support you, but like, just tell me a little bit about like managing compliance there. We all know about the Binance executive that was kept in jail for a while. What does it look like to do business there? What are the challenges that you face? Like, how much time do you spend on kind of like building the relationships with the local regulators, like with the local banks? Tell us a little bit more about that. I think for most of us, it's going to be very foreign, and particularly doing 20 at the same time, right? Like I've seen teams do 1, 2, maybe 3, but not 20. So like that is huge.
Yeah, I think the bottom line and the most simplistic way to put this is you need to follow the law. Right. And that applies sort of to every situation that you can imagine. Right. And, the thing is, look, just to be realistic, you look broadly across the continent. There's not a lot of clarity. Right. Or let me rephrase that. There was not a lot of clarity when we were starting out. And so, really from the beginning, we made it a point to try to work with the FIU, to try to work with the central banks, to try to work with, the SEC or, whoever it is that was, working on regulation for this space. But outside of
for listeners, FIU is the Financial Intelligence Unit, which is in charge with money laundering and terrorist financing, and kind of like aggregating all of that information.
Exactly. And so, And so, I mean, pretty much every country has, it's called something different everywhere, but it's, an FIU of some kind, right? And and I think that that's one of the things that people miss, and that's something that we've really tried to prioritize. Is yes, you need to work with the central bank, you need to work with the SEC or whoever it is that's going to be regulating this technology, but you also need to work with the FIU, right? You also need to go work with the guys that are actually investigating this crime, because the thing is that the regulation is always going to move slowly, and look, we've been very fortunate. You look back over the past 2 years, there's been a massive sea change on the continent. I would argue that, Africa is one of the more crypto friendly places on earth, right? I think, look, the US, obviously, yesterday was the election, and it looks like things are going to change in the US now, from like a crypto standpoint. I think there's going to be a shakeup at the SEC, all of that, right? But, you look back at the last couple of years, the US has not been crypto friendly whatsoever. I think that, if you look at Europe, right, like Mica is not the most crypto friendly law, like, out there, right? At least there's clarity in it, which is good, right? To some degree, at least. But yeah, it's, overall, I think, the West has not been overly friendly towards this space, right? Again, I think that's broadly going to change now, but, Africa over the past couple of years, it really has been, right. In Botswana, there's a license for virtual assets. There's a virtual asset license in South Africa. There's a license in Namibia. There's a license in Mauritius. Nigeria, the SEC has put out guidelines for licensing. There's, laws coming up the pipeline in Kenya and Morocco. There's sandboxing in Zambia and Rwanda and Uganda and Ghana and a number of other places. And so, overall, I think that, when you look broadly at it, the various countries on the continent, largely looking across the board, largely see this as a, technological advancement that can do a lot for the economy, that can do a lot for innovation, in the country, in each individual country, and then for the continent writ large. And I think that's been really powerful, that, there's been regulators sort of across the continent working in a positive manner to, really push this industry forward. And so I think, look, from our standpoint, we work with these guys. We also, like I said, work with the FIUs, because those are the guys that are in the ear, right? In a lot of countries, the FIU is part of the central bank, right? And I don't know if that's the same in like Latin America and everything, but like in Africa, the FIU in a lot of places is actually part of the central bank. It's part of the broader sort of Ministry of Finance. And so, if there is a crime, which, look, you go back, especially a couple of years, there's a lot of crimes that go on that have to be investigated in this space. If there's a crime and you're there to help, you're there, using, blockchain data and using analytics and everything to be able to track this, to be able to say who did what, where the money went, all of that, that goes a long way in helping these guys understand that this technology is not something to be afraid of. It's actually significantly more transparent than the traditional financial system.
I love to hear that. And basically, like you were saying, the West didn't embrace crypto. Africa and many countries in Africa seem to have done it. And it's not the first time, right? Like they leapfrogged kind of like mobile payments first, right? Like mobile money started in some countries in Africa even before smartphones, right? So the Venmos, the Cells started on an SMS basis. So when you have real problems, you push the envelope to kind of leapfrog and kind of implement new technology, which
100%, man. I mean, look, you don't have landlines in Africa, right? That's like the example that everybody always points to, right? The continent went directly to mobile. And one thing that I will say, right, when you look at the continent, I think, just again, speaking at a more macro level, part of the reason that, this technology gets me so excited, especially, in the context of Africa, is when you look broadly at the continent, Africa was later from like a, pure adoption standpoint on the internet, right? Like the average person on the continent not have internet at the same time that the average person in the US or Europe or, East Asia had internet, right? That adoption came a little bit later. Same with mobile phones, right? It took a little bit longer for the average person to be able to access that technology, right? For that technology to be prolific enough across the continent and affordable enough that the average person could access it. And with stable coins, with blockchain technology, for the first time, you have a a paradigm shifting technology that, Africa and the emerging world more broadly are not just going to be able to participate in, they are leading the adoption curve, by many metrics, right? Look, I'm sure y'all saw like the stablecoin report that, Nick Carter and Visa they put out, right? Nigeria is number one for stablecoin usage. Nigeria is like number two overall in terms of crypto and blockchain usage in the world, right? And so, you have countries across the continent that have really adopted this technology, and it's sort of the first paradigm shifting technology that Africa is in a position to not just participate in, but actually lead in terms of adoption, in terms of use cases, right? Real world use cases, right? There's nowhere better than, Africa, than Latin America, than, other parts of the emerging world, right? The real world use cases are not happening in the US, where people are trading dog and cat coin back and forth. Right.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's the first technology that, it's really going to be Africa that drives it, which I think is, extremely exciting.
So we talked a little bit about kind of cross-border payments and kind of like import-export settlement in dollars using stable coins as kind of like the core use case that kind of like moved you guys up and kind of like the main thing that is happening in Africa. What else are you seeing kind of like the early sprouts of around kind of like new use cases now that people actually have holdings in stable coins, they have crypto accounts? Like, what else? What other like doors are opening now that the first door open is kind of like being highly used? Like, what other real world use cases are you seeing, or you're excited about that you're hearing people kind of use?
Yeah, I think that we're still so early on this payments one that it's really difficult to sort of even look beyond that, right? I think, look, there are obviously other exciting use cases for the technology more broadly, right? For blockchain, for, transparency, and for, all of these other things. But I think, the payments use case is still so new, right? In various parts of the continent and the world, frankly, right? That I think it's really difficult to look past it. Look, Stripe, just had the Bridge acquisition, right? $1.1 billion. And now all of a sudden everybody's on notice, right? Everybody for the first time is realizing like, oh crap, one of, arguably the most important fintech company on earth right now, right? In terms of
After Tether.
Of course. Well, yes, that's, but like when you think of like, look, Stripe obviously is getting into crypto, but when I think of like Web 2 companies, traditionally Web 2 companies, I like hard to think of one that's more important right now than Stripe, right?
Yes, PayPal and Stripe, those are the, maybe Stripe,
right. When you think of like Web 2, right? Those guys are completely dominating it. And they are taking a big ass bet on stablecoins for payments. And I think that it's super powerful, right? And I think that, I think that there's still a long way to go, right? I think that there are still so many parts of the economy, of business, et cetera, that need to be able to benefit from this technology. And I think that, look, in like the US and like the West more broadly, especially now with the ETF, we've been able to see that, institutional money is still not in the space, right? I think that everybody talks about like, oh, the ETF is here and now institutional money is flowing in. If you look at the flows, that is not institutional money. Institutional money is like $1 trillion going in over the course of, a couple months or a year. It's not, a couple billion. Right.
And I would say the other big thing is the institutions came in and mostly they're selling to us and they're buying a couple products. They're buying Bitcoin and ETH. Maybe they'll buy Sol, maybe they'll buy XRP, who knows? But they're not using crypto at scale.
Exactly. Right. And the thing is that these institutions have so much to gain from adopting this technology. And this is something that I truly believe is that in order for people to really benefit from this technology, institutions have to be the ones leading that adoption. I'm a firm believer that, my mom is never going to use Bitcoin, right? However, she could certainly use a company like PayPal or, Block or Cash App or any of these that she's already using that is, probably running Bitcoin or stable coins on the back end for payments. And she could use that for a payment without having to know what Bitcoin is, without having to know what stable coins really are, and not having to have any idea how they work, right? The example that I always give is WhatsApp, right? So WhatsApp uses SHA-256 encryption. I have no godly idea how that works. Encryption confuses the crap out of me. It goes way over my head. I don't really understand how the keys get transferred without anybody intercepting it, anything like that, right? Super complicated. It doesn't matter. If I text you and there's 2 blue check marks, that means you read my message. If it's not blue, that means it's delivered. If there's 1 check, it means it's sent, but you haven't gotten it yet. That's it. That's all I need to know. And my life is infinitely better because of encryption, because of encrypted messaging, without me having any godly idea how that actually works. And I think that we need to get to the same point with this technology. And I think one of the big things that people in this industry miss is, and look, it makes sense. The first people in this industry are always, they want to evangelize it, right? They want to teach everybody about Bitcoin. The average person doesn't care, right? The average person does not care about blockchain. They don't care about stable coins. Even our average customer doesn't care. They don't care about stablecoins. They care about, I have a payment that I need to make. My money needs, I need to, receive payments from overseas. That's it. They care about solving their problem, which is that's how the average person thinks, right? I think, it's important for people in the industry to kind of get out of their bubble of, selling each other like super complicated DeFi self-custody protocols and all this. The average person just wants their problem solved. And it all comes down to user experience. You will always win or lose on user experience.
And Chris, we're almost at the top of the hour. So thanks for engaging this great conversation. Maybe a couple last things for you. First off, any fun stories, experiences, unique things you've seen or done during your extensive travels in the African continent?
Oh, my brother, I have stories for days. See, if I knew you were going to want an interesting story, I would have had a couple beers before the shoot. And then, I would have, really gotten on my soapbox and been able to tell them. But, look, I've spent many a night in many a hospital. I have, I've been, I've spent nights in jail, not because of the company, just, in other travel related, stories. And, I have driven through active war zones. You name it. Right. So that's, look, Africa, there's never a dull moment, right? It is the most fun place left on earth because it's just
the frontier.
So new, right? It is just raw potential on the continent, right? So it's fun. It's exciting. It's the second largest continent on Earth behind Asia, right? People don't realize how freaking big it is. Man, it's just an exciting place to be. If you like adventure, if you like, the idea of going somewhere and just figuring it out, you should be doing business on the continent, right? You should be doing business in parts of Latin America. You should be doing business in Central Asia. You should be doing business in these parts of the world, right? The US and Europe are boring, man.
Chris, we need to put a GoPro on you for whenever you go down. And then,
exactly.
We edit the videos and we make a little documentary,
just watching me catch malaria in various different parts of the world.
But last thing for you, Chris, what are you excited about with regard to Yellow Card? Any big launches, any big news coming up? And then where can people follow you guys, learn more about what you guys are building? These are some closing thoughts.
Yeah, man, we're all over Twitter, Instagram, you name it. Follow me, follow the company. Look, I mean, what am I excited about? I am very biased, right? I am excited about everything that we're doing, naturally. But I think, what really gets me the most excited is the potential to work with more companies outside of the continent and bring them in. Right. So I think that, up till date, we've done a very good job of building up our users and sort of, business customer base and all of that on the continent. Right. And look, we serve over 25,000 businesses and, all that. And that's all great. What really excites me, though, is not just continuing to be able to serve more companies on the continent, but being able to bring more companies from outside in. Right. Getting these guys to come into Africa to invest, to hire locally, to put boots on the ground, to offer products on the continent, right? To really grow the overall economy of Africa, right? And I think that I think it's just really hard to actually say, it's easy for me to sit here and say like, oh yeah, this business was able to to invest more and that's great, but what really gets me excited is the trickle down effect of that is, okay, great. This company, because they were using our infrastructure, this company was able to hire more people on the continent. Well, I can tell you from experience, Yellow Card is only what? I mean, we started in Africa in 2018. COVID counts as 12 years. So I think that makes us 18 years old. But we've only been around a little while, right?
Yeah.
We already have 6 former employees that have raised seed funding for their now startups.
Awesome.
6, right?
That's awesome.
And so
in Africa, like working
all in
Africa.
Yeah. And so, think about the trickle down effects of something like that. So it's not just, oh, cool, this company was using our rails, so they were able to hire more people on the continent. Those people that they're hiring, right? You're talking about some of the most entrepreneurial, ambitious, hungry people on earth that are, primed and ready to, just make these countries and make the continent better. Mm-hmm. The people that they're hiring are going to turn around and hire. They are going to turn around and start a company of their own. They are going to attract more investment dollars. They are going to, reshape the overall landscape on the continent, right? Now it's like, okay, great. Now there are more tech companies than ever. And so, okay, cool. We're powering a fintech company. And as a result of this company existing, they're hiring. And a otherwise stay-at-home mom that needs to be at home with the kids is now able to work a job because she can work it from home. She doesn't have to go to an office. Mm-hmm. What's the impact on the economy in 20 years that woman was able to work instead of just staying home with the kids? Right. Yeah. Like it's so difficult to actually project some of this stuff out. But, like I said, I mean, even just with the small sample size that we have, we've had an enormous number, relative to, any other, you look at any other company in the world, right? I mean, we've had an enormous percentage of just our former employees that have turned around, mm-hmm. started businesses, that have hired locally, that have done all this. So that's what really gets me excited is, as you bring in more investment, as you bring more companies into the continent that want to do business, that want to hire locally, that trickle down effect, you're seeing it in Africa more than, frankly, any other part of the world, right? Most people in the US, you get a job and then you go get another job. Most people aren't going to, go start their own company, right? Not anywhere near, 6 out of 200 at least, right? Obviously, some people do, but it's not going to be 6 out of 200, right? And so it's just that to me is what's so exciting, is that entrepreneurial spirit that you see all over the continent, that, when given that chance, when given that push and that opportunity, they're taking advantage of it, and they're going to build a better future for themselves and for the broader continent and therefore the world.
Amazing. What do you think happens with stable coins, the dollar, local currencies? Give us a 1-minute rant, and we'll close with that. Like, what's the future of, like, we're dollarizing everything with stable coins? what happens? What do you think happens in Africa?
This is where I differ, I think, from most of the industry. I don't think that we're dollarizing anything. In fact, I think that the only thing that we're doing is making the dollar more efficient in ways that the dollar is already being used and has been used for the last, 50, 100 years, right? I don't see any evidence to suggest in any of the countries that we serve that they are dollarizing in any way, shape, or form. These countries have all used the dollar for international payments. They use the dollar for savings. They use the dollar for everything that you would expect them to use the dollar for. And now with stablecoins, that's a lot more efficient. It's a lot easier. So I think that, the local currencies and sort of the local banking systems and things like that, they're not the ones that need to be afraid. The people that need to be afraid are SWIFT. The people that need to be afraid are, some of these very large money transfer companies that are not adopting this technology, right? These guys are coming, this technology is coming for your lunch. And it's us in the emerging markets. It's, you have Ripple that does this obviously with, large banks in US and Europe and other parts of the world. You have, so many different companies that are really pushing this use case forward. And again, now after, that Stripe acquisition, it's become a lot more attractive, right? I mean, I can tell you that there are companies and banks that are talking to us that would have never talked to us in a million years before Stripe decided to, throw $1 billion into the ring. So
Nice. That's amazing. I'm curious to see what happens in a couple of months, right? It's been 2 weeks since the Stripe acquisition, and you're already seeing a shift in the mood. Now we have the election as well. So yeah, I think hopefully this is the second COVID wave that you can ride.
Bro, the next 6 months, post Stripe, post US elections, gonna be pretty crazy. That's for this industry. So I hope everybody's ready. So
yeah.
Buckle up.
Awesome.
Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Definitely one of the most interesting journeys for starting a crypto company, from trading Pokémon cards to a one-way flight ticket to Nigeria to starting the biggest infrastructure company for stablecoin on the African continent, and hopefully more soon enough. Thanks for joining us.
And now having the YC Mafia for Africa.
the
Exactly.
YC Mafia, baby.
Exactly.
Everyone,
Awesome.
go follow Chris. Yellow Card, Twitter, LinkedIn. You know where to find him. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thank you, Chance.
Thank you, guys.